On the ground, people return to homes for the first time since running for their lives. Special coverage on the fire now on 2 at noon. Good afternoon, I'm Steve McPartland.
And I'm Laura Zimmerman. Good afternoon, everyone. Firefighters battling that huge blaze in the Oakland Berkeley Hills have finally gotten the upper hand. Late this morning, they announced full containment around the perimeter with control expected sometime tonight. 10 people have died in the blaze. 10 others are still missing. More than 75 people were injured. Some 400 homes have been lost, 200 other structures, most of those garages. And now that firefighters can get into the damaged areas, they are making some gruesome discoveries. Lloyd LaQuesta is live now with the latest on that. Lloyd?
Laura, what you see behind me is search and rescue teams. They are going through the rubble of homes here on Windward Court up in the Hiller Highlands. They are looking for victims, because I can't believe that there would be any survivors here where I am right now. Now, if we can roll the tape, earlier today, up here in the Hiller Highlands, at Schooner, Charing Cross and Schooner Hill, a body was found. It was found in the middle of the street. It appeared that that person was trying to flee the fire. If you said there are 10 confirmed dead, we do not know if this is one of those confirmed or whether the count has now gone higher. But now comes the bad task of going through the rubble and trying to find what's left. Here you see, this is what was called the Parkwood Apartments buildings in the parking lot. Nothing left there, just cars, a swimming pool, it's empty. 3-story apartment complex, completely leveled. People here, as you may have seen some of the earlier film or video, fled the flames which came down the hill. Up in the Hiller Highlands where I am, and that's right above Highway 24, right above the Collicott Tunnel, known for its million-dollar views. Last count, there were at least 177 homes gone. The gentleman I was talking to hadn't finished a count yet, but there are no homes left here at all. And we were able to talk to a couple, Bill and Cheryl Kelly, who somehow made their way through police lines. They had lived up here for 3 years, and they were going through the rubble of their home. And this is what they told me. What's going through your mind right now?
Numbness.
Yeah, it's really just so hard to believe. We came home from Washington, D.C., and at the airport, my husband turned on the radio, and they said that the East Bay Hills were pretty well devastated by fire, and we were just in a state of shock. And of course, we believed it was perhaps everyone else's home but ours, as you always do, but we see today it's us too.
We've got 2 cats.
Yeah, that's our main concern. We had a woman who was taking care of them for us, and we only hope and pray that she came and somehow got them out before this happened.
Cats have not been found yet, and again, the search and rescue people going through the rubble, looking for what they hope they don't find. And I must also add that I'm wearing these protective glasses because the wind is picking up, but it's not a hot wind, it's a cold wind, and it's blowing towards me, which would mean that it's moving sort of east. But as you've said earlier, the fires are contained, but there's still a lot of hot spots, a lot of embers here. A lot of this stuff is blowing up and, you know, swirling in the air, and if it's embers, that it could start burning something again, except up here in the Hiller Highlands, there's nothing to burn anymore. Laura, Steve?
Thank you, Lloyd. Lloyd, from your vantage point, can you see fire at all anywhere through the hills now?
No, there's just sort of like smoke coming up, and there's also a sort of a fog haze up here, Steve. Actually, the fire, there is a fire, is over the other ridge where I'm standing, and that would be towards the Broadway Terrace area. But we have not seen flames yet. I'm starting to feel the search and rescue team are moving closer and closer to me right now, and I don't know whether that indicates that they think they have something here or they're just a routine check. But again, one body was found here this morning when we were up here, and the search goes on.
Lloyd, we need to say, although we have great sympathy for the Kellys, that really people are not allowed to go back up into that area yet. As I understand it, they walked all the way from the Rockridge BART station, which is a couple miles at least. But isn't the advice that we're being given at this point is for people not to try to go back yet until they get the word to go?
Laura, that's true. It is very hazardous up here. Just breathing with the wind kicking up like this, all of this ash is getting into me. But also there's some power lines down here. But I must say, I talked to a police officer because he was here when the Kellys came up, and he said, it was kind of difficult for him to stop them from coming up here. They were basically up here mourning and in grief. But the advice is please don't come up here because it is very dangerous and you'll just hamper the efforts that are going on right now.
All right, Lloyd LaCuesta reporting live. Very sad scene, a scene of total devastation up in that area. Thanks very much for your report, Lloyd. Now, as we have told you, firefighters do have, they believe, the upper hand on the fire. More than 1,000 firefighters have been called in. They have been working on the blaze all night long. So far, the devastating fire has killed at least 10 people, including 1 police officer and also 1 fire department battalion chief. We understand that both of those individuals died in the line of duty while they were trying to save the lives of others. Flames have engulfed some 400 homes and burned up at least 1,700 acres of land. Authorities have evacuated more than 5,000 residents of both Oakland and Berkeley.
Well, Governor Pete Wilson says he'll be reporting to President Bush on the devastation today, and he will ask that Alameda County be declared a federal disaster area. Now, that will make the county eligible for federal relief through FEMA, and Wilson and Oakland Mayor Elihu Harris boarded a National Guard helicopter just after daybreak this morning for a second aerial tour of the devastation.
A National Guard helicopter. There is fog that has come in to somewhat complicate some of the airdrops, but you could see terrible devastation. What showed up last night as burning hot spots in that black of night this morning were clearly the charred ruins of hundreds of homes. The Hiller Highlands area in particular looked as though it had been just shaved.
Well, the official estimate of the damage is put at this point to $1.5 billion. Wilson is praising the, quote, extraordinary coordination of the rescue effort. And Governor Wilson, Mayor Harris, Oakland's fire chief, and other local politicians held a contentious news conference after the helicopter tour. Oakland's fire chief took the brunt of some criticism.
We do have a fog that's moved in, which has caused just a little bit of trouble for water drops, but we figure that that's going to leave by noon sometime today, and our hopes is by sometime this evening that we'll have the fire and most of the hot spots under control. As far as the men and women who were assigned to this task, they've done an excellent job, and you've had people who were working literally 24 hours around the clock without any breaks, many who actually had to put their lives on the line. As you know, we did have a fatality, and they're up there now just giving it all that they have.
Was there a battalion chief as well as a police officer involved in that, those fatalities?
We do have 1 battalion chief and we have 1 police officer. One of the things that really need to be clearly understood is that when you have magnitudes of fire like that, you can't just arbitrarily send people anywhere. We had to be concerned about the safety of the personnel who was on the scene. We had to be sure that we had reconnaissance out there, that we knew exactly where the majority of fire was and which direction it was going in. So before we can commit people and put their lives in jeopardy, we had to get that information in place.
Yes.
Once that was done, we began deploying people appropriately.
But they were told to go home, not to stay and wait, but they were told to go home.
Ma'am, first of all, first of all, they weren't requested to come. They volunteered to come. We had requests through mutual assistance. Those officers were here. They used the officers they needed. Those officers were asked to come, and they responded. The fact that people volunteered is fine, but they were not necessary. They were not requested.
You're saying the cause of the fire was this brush fire?
We have not determined the actual cause of the fire at this point.
Was that brush fire unchecked overnight until the
No. No, as I said, after the fire was contained on that Saturday, we worked up until close to nightfall, and that was in addition to the several water drops that we had that were placed there. We had reasonable assurance that the fire was out. But as with any fire, any brush fire, we leave hose lines in place, and we had engine companies that were rotating around to check the area.
But there were times when nobody was watching that fire?
We had engine companies that were rotating around, yes. No, there was no one that was placed there on a 24-hour basis.
So there were times when there was no human eye on that.
That's correct.
On that side.
All that could be done from the air has been done, seemingly because of the limitations of airspace. There are 20 helicopters, 10 fixed-wing tankers. It appeared this morning that although there were some hot spots, it looked as though it was pretty well contained. I don't want to raise any false expectations, and you should rely on the expertise of the fire department in that regard, and obviously we're hoping the winds stay down. But I would simply comment that there has been an extraordinary job done.
Well, the only thing I want to make is a comment that we've seen Herculean efforts on the part of the people who've been combating this fire. And as the governor indicated, we don't want to be overly optimistic, but at this moment in time, barring any major wind changes and increase in wind, it looks like the fire may in fact be contained. So that's really good news. The question for us now is to realize that the job really begins again for us in this area. Another disaster, another problem for people. Literally hundreds of people will have difficulty getting back in their homes. And I just want to pledge myself, and I know everybody here, to work with people who are out there who have problems. We want them to come forward. We want to help them as the extent possible. By getting this federal declaration and getting a state declaration, we intend to utilize every resource that's available to us to assist these people. So we feel that people have pulled together in this crisis. It's not over yet, but let's hope that we've seen the turning point and we can actually move on to rise from these ashes and rebuild our community once again.
That was Assemblyman Tom Bates. You were watching excerpts from this morning's news conference. Governor Pete Wilson, along with Oakland's new fire chief, Philip Ewell, responding to questions. We should point out that those questions about the strategy used in fighting this fire in no way indicated that anyone was unhappy with any individual firefighters. In fact, many firefighters have been praised for their heroic action. And the firefighters are, of course, at this stage, battling fatigue. Some have been on the fire lines for a total of 24 hours now. Hundreds of firefighters have been staging in the upper Broadway area near Highway 24 to relieve those tired crews. They are coming from as far away as Merced and Lodi to help out. Fire officials say the relief is very much needed.
Well, they came on duty at 8 o'clock yesterday morning, and they've been working the fire since about 10:30 yesterday morning, and a few of them have very little breaks, so they're very exhausted.
Some of those Oakland firefighters are more than just tired. Some of them live in the Oakland Hills and are battling flames to save their own neighborhoods and even homes. We want to show you a series of maps now to give you an idea of exactly how this fire has spread and where it's gone. The perimeter of the fire at this hour, here are the perimeters: south of Claremont to Grizzly Peak, west of Skyline and Grizzly Peak, east of Tunnel Road, east of Broadway and Pleasanton Valley, and north of Shepherd Canyon. The entire fire is, as we said, now contained. And as we were reporting earlier, the fire had split into 3 separate fingers. The first finger was contained early this morning. It covered the area north of Highway 24 to just near the Claremont Hotel in Berkeley. The second burned along Highway 13 northwest to Broadway Terrace and the Parkwood area of Oakland. The fire had also worked its way across Highway 13, the Warren Freeway, around Lake Temescal and into the Rockridge neighborhood. Again, firefighters have contained the blaze, and they are now working on putting out hot spots around Clarewood Drive and Mountain View Cemetery.
And one of the areas hardest hit by the fire is near Oakland's Lake Temescal, and Gary Kalfish standing by live in the area on Buena Vista Avenue with a report on the damage. Gary?
Steve, fear and anxiety yesterday has been replaced by despair and tears up here on the Broadway Terrace neighborhood. A lot of fancy addresses here: Golden Gate Avenue, Buena Vista, choice views of the bay. Today the view is of chimneys and ash and charred memories. Surveying the devastation, we came upon Alfred Lee walking around in a half daze. Lee is a volunteer firefighter. He spent all yesterday and last night battling the fire. Finally this morning he got a chance to see how his home fared. Badly. Nothing left.
I couldn't believe it. I mean, at first I was trying to calm my neighbors down, saying that they didn't need to take the stuff out. Because of that, I didn't take anything out, so everything of mine is here. So, you know, I'm just working on adrenaline right now. It's just keeping myself occupied so I don't go into hysteria. It's hard to lose everything you have. Especially, you make it finally buy a real nice house with a view, panoramic view of 4 bridges, and boom, overnight it's gone.
And now a happy story. Rick Didier came back to his home this morning and found it untouched.
Oh, when we packed up, the house behind us was on fire. You know?
There's nothing.
Oh, man. I didn't want to give you the house number. I said, these guys are going to hex me. If I give them the house number, it's going to be gone. It made it.
Rick's car was burned. His tires were flat and melted. He didn't care. His house is okay. All the houses around Rick's were burned to the ground except for one. Just by chance, his stood. He says he's thrilled. Of course, he's excited. He doesn't have any neighbors, though, and he probably won't for quite a while. The devastation here is almost total. Everywhere you look, just chimneys. It's a land of chimneys, nothing else. A few trees survived. Most of them are burned black, just branches. The devastation, from our point of view, having covered the Santa Barbara fire, the devastation here is so much more concentrated and so much worse. It's all of these people are coming up here. They're allowing residents to come in now. The residents are wandering around, you know, hoping upon hope that their home might be okay, but it's rare that you find a case such as Rick Didier's. In most cases, people come back and find they have nothing left. We just talked to a police officer, Sergeant Roth, and he was out here directing traffic, keeping people who shouldn't be up here from being up here. As we got to talking to him, he said he lost his home as well. It's quite a scene. Laura and Steve.
Well, Gary, like the Santa Barbara fire, this is very choice real estate. Nothing else like it in the Bay Area. And the folks that you've talked to who lost their homes, are they talking at all about rebuilding?
Well, Alfred Lee is talking about rebuilding. He says that's the only thing he can do to console himself. That's the only way he can keep his concentration and keep himself from breaking down. He also pointed out that this is something that was something in life that he'd always wanted to do, to have a beautiful home with a panoramic view of the bay, and moved here a couple of years ago, and now, of course, it's gone. And really, that's something that you hold on to. It's your home, it's your stuff, your bed, your kitchen. He was talking about his tools, how he lost his tools. Well, relatively speaking, tools are a small thing to lose, but they mean so much to people, you know, to your stuff, the things that you have, and they're all completely gone. He lives with his wife there. His wife is okay. She got out. He never had a chance yesterday while he was fighting a fire. He's a volunteer firefighter, fighting a fire on Glenwood. He never had a chance to come over here and get anything out for himself. As he was walking away, he told me at least he may have lost everything, but at least he saved somebody else's home.
It's a noble thought there. You know, Gary, Rick Didier is certainly a happy man now that his house is safe, but his life will too be affected when you consider the devastation that surrounds his house. I mean, where you're standing right now looks to me like a graveyard with all of the chimneys acting as grave markers.
It's a land of chimneys, Steve. There is absolutely nothing here except for chimneys. In certain areas, you'll find a couple of homes that were spared. In a big fire like this, where the wind swirls and gusts and suddenly sends burning cinders into the air, the cinders lodge on one roof and the house next to it and the house next to that, and then they skip over a couple of others. So yes, most of the homes in this area, one of our reporters, Betty Ann Bruno, has a home on Buena Vista, and we went up there, and there's absolutely nothing left of that home. All the way along the street, the homes are gone. This one fellow, just by fate or by luck or whatever you would call it, his home is okay. As you can see right now, there is nothing here. As far as we can see, looking all the way around 360 degrees, there are no homes standing. Get up a little higher, there are some, maybe a little lower, but in this area, it was just total devastation.
Okay, Gary, thank you very much for that report. Well, as we've been telling you, the fire may now be contained, but just over 24 hours ago, the picture was more frightening. When the hills of the East Bay ignited into a firestorm yesterday morning, no one knew where the destruction would end. Carrie Manley has a recap of what happened yesterday.
Should have these people don't understand. They got to leave. They got to leave their cars here. You better off to leave your cars and walk. All right? Apartments right up
24. Scenes of pure terror in the Oakland Berkeley Hills. This location near the Caldecott Tunnel was one of the first hit by the fire. The fierce flames here had people running for their lives through an inferno of intense heat and smoke. Firefighters worked frantically to try and stop the unstoppable.
Water left alone.
Within minutes here, the fire destroyed an entire 250-unit apartment complex. For some motorists in the area, it was like driving into a nightmare. Emergency crews closed smoke-filled roads as quickly as they could, but there were early reports 5 people in one car ran out of time and did not survive.
They're telling people to just get out of their car. Not yet.
For homeowners, it was a living hell. The fire engulfed canyons and ridges, jumped roads, and swallowed up entire neighborhoods. Oh! Transformers exploded, leaving thousands without power. And 5 years of hard drought made conditions here especially volatile. Some people tried desperately to spray down their homes with hoses. But then came the moment of no return. Hundreds of people had to leave, even if it meant leaving behind a lifetime of possessions and personal treasures. Street by street, they evacuated homes that were all too quickly turning into ovens. In an instant, multi-million-dollar estates raged into balls of fire. And still, it burned on, leaving a path of total destruction, the worst fire ever in the history of California. In Oakland, Carrie Manley for 2 at Noon.
I just can't look at those pictures without feeling sick to my stomach, and I must have seen them 15 times this morning.
Yeah, it's unbelievable stuff.
Well, coming up next, more on the fire, including a traffic update on road closures.
And also, we're going to try to look ahead. We'll have a live report from our Washington Bureau on disaster funding.
About the fire, will victims get federal loans to rebuild their homes? Governor Wilson has asked the White House to declare the East Bay Hills a disaster area. And for more about possible federal help, we go to our Washington, D.C. Bureau, where David Snepp is standing by with a live report. David?
Well, Steve, as you just said, Governor Pete Wilson has requested some federal help. The White House has not officially received that request yet. As we understand, that has to happen before the president can declare an emergency. But the task for Washington, at least at this point, is getting help as quickly as possible to those who need it most.
Firefighters that we've been talking to overnight have been...
Imagine the frustration of Senate staffers watching the flames over Oakland. Their jobs 3,000 miles away transformed overnight into the buffer between disaster and bureaucracy.
The death count we've got now is somewhere between 500 and 800 homes.
Senator John Seymour's office kept close contact with California officials this morning to help prepare for disaster relief. Already, the state's senior lawmaker pressed the feds for help.
And they can give some financial and technical help, and I'm communicating with the president to urge him to get that help there as fast as possible.
So far, the White House has yet to act, but most expect the president to declare a disaster. Federal relief efforts will be similar to those following the earthquake in 1989.
If that declaration is made, our regional office there, in cooperation with the state and the city and the volunteer agencies, will set up disaster assistance centers.
As 2 years ago, families without homes or insurance will be given priority, although an exact timetable remains unclear.
In some cases, the insurance policy the people carry will provide for them during that period. Other cases, that's not going to be available, and it's up to us to identify those cases as quickly as possible.
Congress may need to allocate more money to federal emergency efforts. For the second time in as many years, a California tragedy captivates Washington's attention.
So there is something Washington to do. We can't prevent the fire. The tragedy has occurred, but we can help in the recovery.
Now, no one doubts that President Bush will declare an emergency, and as you heard, what that means is the Federal Emergency Management Agency will then set up a center or centers in the Oakland area and help first the homeless and those who are uninsured. Small businesses damaged by the fire will also be eligible for some federal help. And Steve and Laura, I know it's probably no comfort to those who are suffering through this tragedy in Oakland, but it does appear that the wheels are in motion here in Washington and will continue to do so once the fire is put out and the work of recovery begins.
All right, David, thanks for that report. We understand in about an hour we'll get an official word from the White House on that and probably a declaration of disaster. And among the people who are going to be looking for assistance and help are two of our own. 2 employees here at KTVU are among the victims who lost homes to the firestorm. Reporter Betty Ann Bruno and her husband, photographer Greg Shiner's home was destroyed in the fire.
2 fires started on our roof within about 10 minutes. I was up on the roof with a couple of garden hoses, and one of the neighbors came by, and we got a crowbar and, you know, hacked out the burning shingles and wet down the roof. And then I just thought, well, I'm just going to stay here and protect the house. But then houses around in the neighborhood just started going up, and within just a very few minutes, there were fire trucks all around and firemen running through the neighborhood saying, get out, just leave, get out.
Strange to say, but almost eerily beautiful in its own ways. There were houses with peaked roofs, with the flames shooting as high as you could see into the smoke and then disappearing. Homes next door to that, not burning at all, while behind them, silhouetted by more flames of more houses. Some houses leveled to the ground, others only the first story. There was no one on the streets. There were firemen in the backyard of the house next to ours trying to save the roof of the house two homes away from ours, but no one else on the street. I wandered, I was in a daze. I still don't believe it.
Betty Ann and Craig's home was located on Buena Vista in the Oakland Hills, and it was among the first homes to go down.
Well, one other Northern California fire to report today. This one is raging in Sonoma County and has so far torched more than 5,000 acres. The blaze broke out 9 miles northeast of Healdsburg at about 6:30 yesterday morning. About 30 residents of Pine Flat Road have been evacuated, but no structures have been damaged. Fire officials say winds have died down in the area and 20% of the blaze has been contained.
In the wake of this devastating fire, traffic throughout the Bay Area became a disaster all its own today. Sal Castaneda is in our newsroom now, and he's going to give us an update on exactly what is going on road-wise at this hour. Sal.
All right, Laura and Steve, 2 major Bay Area freeways remain shut down because of the ongoing fire. Of course, Highway 24 and Highway 13. If we can go to our maps, I'll show you exactly where the closures are. Highway 24 is shut down between the Orinda Crossroads and Highway 580. As a matter of fact, they're using Highway 24 right in front of the Rockridge BART station as a staging area. They have the fire department there, and the helicopter equipment is landing in the area. So it is doubtful that it will be reopened anytime within the near future, although they do hope to have it reopened for the afternoon commute. When they do reopen Highway 24, all the Oakland exits will still be shut down. You will not be able to get off the freeway, but you will be able to use the Caldecott Tunnel. The next map will show you what I mean about alternate routes. If you can avoid Highway 24 altogether and use Highway 680 all the way down to the 580 interchange, that would be your best bet. I know it's a long way to go, but at least traffic is moving well, and that way you can get to any of the Bay Area bridges. And the next map will show you an alternate route I do not suggest, because Highway 4 between Concord and Highway 80 has been crowded all day long. It's moderate right now, but this afternoon it's just going to be a mess. So, people have been waiting at 2 hours at some of the longest commutes to get down to Highway 80 via Highway 4 and the 680 area. So also the Carquinez and the Benicia Bridge are very slow. One last note I do want to talk about is that the Caltrans department, those orange tow trucks, are clearing the freeways all the way up to the Carquinez Bridge, all the way up to the Benicia Bridge in order to keep traffic moving. They are working out of their jurisdiction, and they will be working that way throughout the afternoon. Laura and Steve?
All right, Sal. Thanks for that information. Coming up next on 2 at Noon, we'll have a live update on the weather situation, which is changing in favor of firefighters.
Plus, another live report from the fire scene. All that's coming up. See the normal programming at 12:30. You are now watching an expanded version of 2 at Noon. We felt that it was appropriate to go to an hour this day, considering all of the breaking news and developments regarding the fire in the Oakland and Berkeley Hills. We will be joining People's Court, though, at 1 o'clock. Well, the firefighters battling the Oakland-Berkeley Hills blaze may get a break from the weather today. Conditions are changing, and meteorologist Mike Peckner is live by phone now with details. Mike, hello. How are you?
How you doing, Steve?
How is the wind, and how will the wind affect things?
Well, right now we have northwesterly winds about 10 to 15 miles an hour. The only station right now bucking that trend is San Francisco International Airport with a northeast wind at 7 miles an hour. The Alameda Naval Air Station has a northwest wind, and that has pushed some of the fog into the bay at this hour. The perimeter is so large now, and with so many firefighters within that perimeter, the spotting that we had yesterday that caused the incredible conflagration that we saw will probably not happen today because they have enough firemen in the area to pick up any burning embers from the wind. The main thing right now is that the humidities are much higher, and this has helped slow the spread of the fire.
Mike, yesterday part of the problem was the fact that the wind was a dry wind. In this morning's weather reports, we were reporting that there might be almost a misty, cool wind today, which would help firefighters. Is that coming to fruition?
Yeah, it certainly is, Steve. And the interesting thing is that yesterday's fire weather was the only time this year that we've had the combination of hot, dry winds, hot temperatures, and an offshore breeze. You need that offshore wind to cause the air to come downslope off the Sierra Nevada and heat by compression or friction with the air surface in the same way you'd rub your hands together. And we haven't had those three conditions at the same time all this year. Yesterday was the only day that we've had it. And, of course, today, if we had the similar type situation with that fire in Oakland, it probably wouldn't have spread as much. So it was just ironic that it happened yesterday.
Mike, if you can look ahead for us a little bit, we are headed into a rainy season. If we have normal rainfall this year with entire neighborhoods now in rubble and ash, are we in for some very heavy-duty mudslides?
We certainly could see that. In fact, with all the foliage and trees and other type plants that have been denuded from those hillsides, if we get a heavy rain sometime this winter, could cause problems in the fire areas. I just might mention that our long-range data does show a wet November, so they need to do some reforestation and put in some ice plants and stuff like that very quickly up there.
All right, Mike Peckner, thanks very much for that information.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mike. You have some phone numbers for us, Laura?
Yeah, we do. We want to give you some phone numbers that hopefully will help you out. At today's news conference, which we showed you a bit earlier, officials announced a hotline number for residents who might want to know whether or not they can get back into their neighborhoods to assess or see for themselves just how bad the damage is. Here's that number, area code 510. This is a homeowner's hotline number, and that is 800-927-HELP.
And that's for people who are curious about their insurance coverage.
Right. This has been set up by, I think, State Insurance Commissioner John Garamendi.
That's right.
He promised to do it yesterday, a hotline for residents to call about their home. Even if you haven't seen it yet, you can call this number and maybe get some good idea now how to go about collecting, getting damages, what information you'll need to compile. The other number, which we also do want to give you, is a number for people who want to know when they can get back in to their homes. I'm going to give you the number. It's not on the screen. The number is area code 510-287-6000. We have tried to call that number. It's been busy a lot, but hopefully you'll be able to get through it if you keep on trying. Now, if you would like to help out, we have some information for you as well through the Red Cross Fire Relief Fund. They tell us at this point they don't need supplies, but they sure could use some money. Checks can be mailed to this address, 2111 East 14th Street, Oakland, California. The zip 94606. There is also a drop-off point for donations. That's at Lucky's or Coldwell Banker. Now, we'll try to get you, that's not real specific for people, but at least there's an address where if you want to send a check now, you can do it. A lot of people want to help out.
Okay, well, coming up next, other headlines from around the nation and the world, including movement on the Mideast hostage situation.
Also coming up, Jerry Brown takes the big political plunge. That's ahead.